Welcome to FCNYC. My name is Ben Chan and I am one half of HBO's Punch Zone team. We've got a lot of boxing to talk about for this upcoming week, but we're going to start by recapping Andre Ward's domination over Chad Dawson. This was a fight where a lot of people expected Andre Ward to come in and win the fight. Now, they didn't expect Andre Ward to win in the fashion that he did. Andre Ward has always been the kind of fighter that's steady, that doesn't do anything spectacular, but does a lot of things okay. And he's a fighter that a lot of people don't view as a knockout kind of fighter, a spectacular kind of fighter like a Manny Pacquiao or a Nonito Donaire. But this past Saturday, he showed that he is clearly an elite fighter and actually might be the number 2 or the number 3 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, depending on where you have Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao ranked. Now, Chad Dawson came into this fight as the light heavyweight champion of the world, and he leaves the fight as the light heavyweight champion of the world because he is the belt holder at 175. He came down to 168 to challenge Andre Ward to try to take home Andre Ward's belt at 168. Andre Ward won the super middleweight tournament. He is the best super middleweight in the world. He beat guys like Arthur Abraham, Mikhail Kessler, Carl Froch, and especially the victory versus Carl Froch, he made it look kind of easy. And he has gotten better with every fight. He is the fighter that has gained the most, that has improved the most throughout the super middleweight tournament. And he is a young fighter. He's only 28 years old, but he's got very crafty veteran moves. He does things that are Bernard Hopkins-like in there. He takes the fighter out of his boxing, makes the fighter fight his fight. He adjusts to what the fighter is doing, just like he did against Chad Dawson, who came out and won the first 2 rounds of the fight. And it looked like Ward was going to have trouble figuring out Dawson's jab. Dawson has a longer reach than Ward, and it looked like he was going to be able to use that jab all night to keep Ward on the outside. But in the 3rd round, Ward figured it out. And not only did he figure it out, he figured it out well enough to knock down Chad Dawson, and the fight was over from that point on. Ward just took over the fight, knocked him down the 3rd round, knocked him down the 4th round, and in between those rounds and the knockout round, he just put a beating on Chad Dawson, roughed him up, and in the 8th round, hit him with a devastating pair of uppercuts that drew blood in the mouth, and by the 10th round, Dawson had nothing left. Dawson was being physically, he was being mentally, and he got knocked down, and the ref asked him whether he wanted to continue. At first, Dawson said yes, but then when the ref asked him, "Are you okay? Do you want to continue again?" The answer was no. And that doesn't make Chad Dawson a quitter. It just shows you how badly Ward had beat him up, and it was pretty bad. This was a spectacular fight. This was a coming out party for Andre Ward. Now, if you haven't seen the fight, go back and watch it, because this was a master class in boxing, it was a master class in adjusting, and it makes you really start to think about Andre Ward's position in boxing right now. Like I said, there are people who consider him the second or 3rd best fighter in the world right now. I would go with that. I haven't really thought about where I rank Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao, whether they're 1 or 2 or 1 and 3. Andre Ward is up there. He is up there. He has fought great, really good level competition. He has cleaned out the super middleweight division. Who is there left for him to fight at super middleweight? The only guy he hasn't fought there, the only top fighter he hasn't fought, was Lucien Boutet. And Carl Froch beat the crap out of Lucien Boutet. And Andre Ward beat the crap out of Carl Froch. So I don't think he needs to fight Lucien Boutet. Maybe there needs to be a rematch between Froch and Andre Ward, though Ward beat him pretty easily the first time, so I don't see why there needs to be a rematch. So who is there left for this guy to fight? He'll keep on fighting. Hopefully he fights good guys. Hopefully he doesn't fight Joe Calzaghe, who's been retired for 2 years, who thinks that in his prime he would be an Andre Ward. Joe Calzaghe is a guy that people consider the best super middleweight ever, because super middleweight is a young division and Calzaghe reigned over it for about 10 years. So people have been talking about whether a prime Joe Calzaghe would have been a prime Andre Ward. Andre Ward is in his prime now. I want to see him fight other fighters in their prime, and I want to see what he can do. But Andre Ward is a fighter that we definitely need to pay attention to, because he is a special fighter. Also on that card was Antonio DeMarco versus John Molina Jr., a fight that a lot of people thought was going to be an all-action fight, and there was a lot of action. For all of the minute or so that it lasted, DeMarco came out and caught Molina cold, and from that point on, Molina just kind of tried to protect himself, tried to get his feet back. He couldn't. He went into a defensive shell, put his arms up, kneeled down, wasn't really leaning against the ropes, and his knees weren't, nor his elbows weren't touching the ground. So it's not like there wasn't a lot the ref could do. You see a guy getting beat up against the ropes, he's not really fighting back, you got to stop the fight. And that's exactly what happened to John Molina. He gave the ref no choice. There's no standing 8 count in boxing. There's no timeout in boxing. Timeout means the fight's over. And for John Molina, the fight was over right then and there. That's all there is to say about that. Antonio DeMarco looked impressive again. It looks like the next fight he's going to make is the Adrian Broner fight. They're talking about making it in November because DeMarco didn't take any punishment at all from Molina. So that's a possibility. And this would be actually a really good fight for Adrian Broner's first fight at 135. So we'll have more to talk about once that fight is made. But before we move on to this weekend's action, let's also talk about Lucas Matthysse, who beat a very game fighter in Olusegun Ajose. And Ajose is a New York-based fighter. He is from Nigeria, and he fought his heart out. He came forward all night. He was trying to outbox Lucas Matthysse, but Lucas Matthysse he's a hard puncher, and I like Lucas Matthysse because he is the kind of fighter that invests in the body, and he beat up Ajose's body, and he beat him up and broke him down. Ajose couldn't hurt Lucas Matthysse, and that was his problem. If he had been able to sting Lucas Matthysse, if he had been able to hurt Lucas Matthysse, he would have had some success. And there were times when Ajose, even though he was hurt, would come out and show flashes and land combinations, because the thing about Matthysse is he fights at one pace. He's a very steady fighter that fights at one pace, and there were times when I felt that he could have knocked out Ajose and taken him out, but Matthysse doesn't put the foot on the gas pedal. He just comes at you at one pace, and that's why Matthysse has losses to Zab Judah and Devon Alexandra, because he wasn't able to apply the pressure after he knocked those guys down. Now, arguably, he won those fights, and there are a lot of people who think he actually won those fights. There are people who make the argument that Lucas Matthysse is undefeated. Whether you think he won those fights or not, there is no doubt that he is one of the best light junior welterweights in the world. He is one of the best 140-pound fighters, and I want to see him fight the top guys at 140. He deserves that chance. He's got a belt now. Let's see if somebody can unify them. Now, let's talk about this weekend. There is so much boxing this weekend, so much good boxing. Now, unfortunately, a lot of it is on at the same time. You got the Showtime card, and then you got the HBO pay-per-view card. We're going to start by talking about the Showtime card. The Showtime card, the main fight of the night, is Canelo Alvarez versus Josesito Lopez. We'll get to that. I think from top down, the Showtime card is actually a little bit better than the HBO card, just because the undercard is better. The first fight on the Showtime card is Leo Santa Cruz versus Eric Morel. This is a classic fight between a young fighter and a veteran. Eric Morel is, well, he's like 37 now. Really old for a veteran, and he's got a lot of good fights on his ledger. We'll see what Leo Santa Cruz can do with Eric Morel. He should be able to beat him, but maybe Morel has an upset or two left in him. We'll see. The next fight on the card, Marcos Maidana versus Jesus Soto Karass. That's a tune-up fight for Marcos Maidana. Soto Karass, he's a famous name. He's a guy who's given a lot of fighters really tough fights, but he's a fighter that is shop-worn. He doesn't have a lot left in him, and this is really a tune-up fight for Maidana, who's coming off his own loss versus Devon Alexandra, who Maidana didn't look really good. This fight will, well, I'm not sure if it's actually going to tell us where Maidana is, but it's a stay busy fight for him. The next fight, Johnny Gonzalez versus Daniel Ponce de Leon. This is a quality fight. This is a good fight between two veterans that are in their 30s, veterans that have fought top competition, that have had their share of wins, had their share of losses, that both have different kinds of flaws. This should be a really, really interesting, good fight. But this is the appetizer for the main event, Canelo Alvarez versus Josesito Lopez. Now, this was not the fight that Canelo Alvarez was looking to make after he beat Shane Mosley. He was looking for a big fight. Canelo Alvarez wanted a pay-per-view. He wanted to fight somebody like Victor Ortiz. That fight looked like it was about to be made, but there was one guy that Victor Ortiz had to fight and get past first, Josesito Lopez. And Josesito Lopez would have none of that. He came into the fight that night moving up from 140 to 147, and he fought his heart out. He came into the fight and he took some really vicious punches from Victor Ortiz, and Josesito Lopez dished out his own share of punishment, and Lopez actually ended up breaking Ortiz's jaw. And that's how Ortiz lost the fight, and this is why Josesito Lopez is fighting Canelo Alvarez on Showtime. Josesito Lopez moved up from 140 to 147 to fight Ortiz. Now he's moving up again from 147 to 154, junior middleweight, to fight Canelo Alvarez. What does Canelo Alvarez bring to the ring? He brings a spotless record. He hasn't lost yet. He's got 41 fights and no losses. He's got 29 knockouts. Now, the fights haven't been against really elite level competition. There's some names on it, notably Shane Mosley, but Shane Mosley, come on, let's be honest, he's not an elite fighter anymore. He was an elite fighter when he fought Canelo Alvarez. Josesito Lopez brings a record of 30-4 with 18 KOs. He's not really a knockout fighter, although he did knock out Victor Ortiz. He did move up in weight to 147 and knock out Victor Ortiz. So Josesito Lopez says that Canelo Alvarez needs to be afraid of his power. Maybe he does. They have been doing weigh-ins before this fight periodically. They did a 30-day weigh-in and they did a 7-day weigh-in. At the 7-day weigh-in before the fight, Josesito Lopez came in at 160 pounds and Canelo Alvarez came in at 159, I mean. So maybe that means that the weight problem isn't going to be that much of a difference between Lopez and Alvarez. Maybe Lopez is the same size as Alvarez, but there's no doubt in my mind that Alvarez is the more sturdy junior middleweight. He's the guy that's fought more at 154 than Josesito Lopez. This is Josesito Lopez's first fight at 154 pounds. So you really have to wonder whether, number one, he could take the kind of punishment that Alvarez is going to dish out, and number two, whether he could actually hurt Alvarez, who doesn't have the same defensive flaws as Victor Ortiz. This is a very interesting fight, and to be honest with you, as a boxing fan, I like a guy like Josesito Lopez, because he is a guy who is willing to fight top competition and go wherever and fight whoever. And this is a guy I think that a lot of people should like. So good luck to Canelo, good luck to Josesito Lopez. We'll see what happens on Saturday night. Now let's move over to the HBO pay-per-view card. This is the fight that I've been looking for. This is the middleweight fight, the glamour division of boxing, where we have Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. versus Sergio Martinez. It's for the WBC middleweight belt. Now, a little word about the undercard before we move on to the main event. Who do we have on the HBO pay-per-view undercard? We got a fighter named Matthew Macklin, a guy that Sergio Martinez recently beat, versus Josesito Olusegun, a guy that not a lot of people have seen recently. He's a guy that's been in and out of boxing, he's kind of a boring fighter. He has some skill. I'm not that interested in the fight. Maybe they'll end up putting on a really good fight. Maybe Macklin and Olusegun will fight the fight of their lives, but I don't really see that happening. And then the other undercard fight that looks a little bit interesting is you have Roman Martinez versus Miguel Beltran. Martinez hasn't fought since 2010. He's a former belt holder, but after he lost in 2010, hasn't fought since then. Beltran has never fought a guy as good as Roman Martinez. So maybe even with the long layoff, maybe even with the rust, Martinez has enough to defeat Beltran. That's the interesting part about that fight. It's for the super featherweight belt that Adrian Broner abandoned to move up in weight. So that's another title fight on the card, but let's talk about the main course. Let's talk about Julio Cesar Chavez versus Sergio Martinez for the WBC middleweight belt. Now, usually, I don't really talk about belts. I don't really care about who has a belt. I'll tell you who the champion is. And to me, Sergio Martinez is the middleweight champion. He's the man who beat the man. Sergio Martinez defeated Kelly Pavlik and won the lineal middleweight championship of the world. Then Sergio Martinez has had problems finding opponents. He wanted to fight a guy named Sebastian Zibik. Zibik was the next guy in line for the WBC. And the only problem was HBO said, no, that's not a good fight. That's not an HBO fight. We don't want to see that fight. So Martinez, needing to make money, needing to pay bills, said, okay, I'll fight the guy you want me to fight. Meanwhile, Julio Cesar Chavez turns around and says, I'll fight Sebastian Zibik. And so the WBC took the belt away from Sergio Martinez and put it on the line for Zibik versus Chavez. And after Chavez won the fight, on HBO took that fight after telling Martinez that they wouldn't take a Zibik fight. They took Chavez versus Zibik. Chavez won the fight and he becomes a WBC belt holder. Martinez did nothing to lose the belt. He is the middleweight champion of the world in my mind and in a lot of people's mind. And even though Chavez is the one walking into the ring with the belt, Martinez is the champion in my view. He is the guy that beat the guy, okay? So what does Chavez bring into this fight? There are a lot of people who don't like Chavez, but just because you don't like Chavez doesn't mean he's not a legit fighter. He has grown to be a good fighter. He has grown to be a solid in-fighter. He's going to come in bigger than Sergio Martinez. He is going to try to beat Sergio Martinez to the body, just like he did to Andy Lee, just like he did to Zibik, just like he's done to the other middleweights that he's fought. Sergio Martinez is he's a whole nother bowl of problems, because Sergio Martinez is not Julio Cesar Chavez. Sergio Martinez is a very thoughtful fighter. He's a very sneaky fighter. He's going to come in and he's going to try to disrupt. He's going to try to disrupt Julio Cesar Chavez. He's going to come in and he's going to be crafty. He's going to try to sting Julio Cesar Chavez. He's going to try to make him run after Sergio Martinez. Sergio Martinez is not going to stand in front of Chavez and make himself an easy target. He will try to box Chavez, and then he will try to knock him out. This is a good fight. This is a really important fight. It's for the middleweight champion of the world. I'm really excited about this fight, and I really think that a lot of people are underrating Sergio Martinez. There are a lot of people who think that Chavez is going to use his size and his age. Sergio Martinez is 37 years old. Chavez is in his late 20s. There's a significant age disadvantage for Sergio Martinez. Chavez is a younger fighter. He's a hungrier fighter, but is he the better fighter? I don't think so. I think Sergio Martinez is in a different class than Chavez. I don't think Chavez has gotten to that class yet. I don't think his win against Andy Lee proves that he is in Sergio Martinez's class. And I look forward to a good fight. I look forward actually to a great fight between Sergio Martinez and Julio Cesar Chavez. And I fully expect Martinez to walk away with the victory. That's going to be an HBO pay-per-view. Tune in next week when we dissect what happened on the Showtime fight and on the HBO fight. Thank you for tuning in to FCNYC. Take care.